Yo, this is the Scarcity Studios YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And our sponsors at Alpha Claims and Hire Birmingham, the leading and best accident management company. Get a replacement car anywhere in 1 hour. I really appreciate you joining me again today, and this story comes from Coventry in the West Midlands. Matthew Chibnall has been jailed for the murder of Anil Vegad. Rest in peace. Police discovered that he'd lived with the dead body of his flatmate for up to 6 weeks. Various things in this story has led me to believe living together as friends. There's no insinuation there was in a relationship other than friendship. He's been jailed on December the 1st for stabbing his best friend to death. Matthew Chibnall is 55 years old. He stabbed at Anil before using his bank cards to buy alcohol while the body lay in the flat for several weeks. Chibnall only handed himself into police after he emptied his friend's bank account. Officers found the victim, Anil, who was 57, lying dead in a chair in the living room with a stab wound to his back and deep knife wounds in the furniture at the property on Eden Street in Coventry in the West Midlands. Chibnall claimed that he thrust the knife through the chair where Mr Vegad had been sitting to get his attention as he had been behaving erratically. He alleged that it happened after they had been drinking on Easter Monday, and the following day his friend felt unwell and collapsed. Despite Chibnall telling officers, if you do the crime, you gotta do the time, I suppose, upon being charged with murder, he went on to deny deliberately killing his friend. Police were able to prove that he intended to kill or seriously harm Mr Vegad, and the 55-year-old was convicted following a trial at Coventry Crown Court. On December the 1st, he was jailed for a minimum of 18 years, and in a statement by Mr Vegad's family, they said, "We have all been devastated as a family, although justice has now been served, but this will never bring our dad back." He was a loving, kind and generous person, and whenever our dad walked into a room, he lit it up. Our dad was well known in the community and well loved by everyone. Our dad will be deeply missed and never forgotten, and always be in our hearts. Detective Inspector Hannah Whitehouse from West Midlands Police Homicide Team said, "We may never know exactly what happened in the flat which led to Mr Vegad being fatally stabbed. We believe he was stabbed through the chair twice, and that is what led to his death." Chibnall could have immediately called emergency services and potentially saved his friend's life. However, he just let Mr Vegad die and stole his bank card to buy alcohol in the weeks after his death. But luckily for the family, they were able to prove that he seriously meant to hurt him or kill Mr Vegad, and this has now resulted in the life sentence. And as they stated several times in the story about him being a friend, when clearly this was not the case, if you're able to sit around a person's corpse for 6 weeks and then take advantage by stealing from them as well, then he was never really a friend in the first place. I think that would be fair to say. So I send my condolences to the family of Anil Vegad, and it's a sad story to hear, and also shows the consequences of alcohol, because of course you can't dismiss that alcohol must have contributed to his cold-heartedness, to the fact that he was so selfish. Addiction does this to people, and it is no excuse, but it definitely is a contributing factor. In other news coming from Birmingham, in a story we covered before, a double murder case in Moseley. Tamir Mustafa has been found guilty of the brutal murder of his wife and neighbour in the Moseley area. The 40-year-old admitted killing his wife, Nellie Mustafa, who was 43, and his next-door neighbour, Zahida Bai, who was 52. Tamir Mustafa was high on cocaine, they said, when he killed his wife at their home in Bell Walk in Moseley on March the 16th. He then went next door to butcher his neighbour, Zahida Bai, 52. The delusional 40-year-old had believed wrongly that his wife had been unfaithful to him. He inflicted 80 injuries to each victim, so he stabbed them 160 times. Birmingham Crown Court heard that he had suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, and a jury had to decide whether he was guilty of double murder or manslaughter. And as I previously mentioned with addiction, any sort of current mental health issues will only be exacerbated by any sort of drug, alcohol, cocaine, etc. It will only ever make it worse. The jury deliberated for 4.5 hours and found the defendant guilty of 2 murder charges. Mustafa, who appeared via video link from a Birmingham hospital, will be sentenced on Friday, December the 4th. The trial heard that he simply could not accept that his marriage to Nellie Mustafa, with whom he had 4 children, was coming to an end. Jury were also told the defendant, who had become a regular cocaine user, held unfounded beliefs that she cheated on him with his own father as well as their landlord, the next door neighbour, both of whom lived next door. Opening the case, prosecutor Peter Glenser said on March the 16th, West Midlands Police received a 999 call from the defendant. His name was Tamir, and the operator asked him what had happened. He said he'd murdered his wife and he gave the address, Bow Walk. He said she was dead in the house and the knife was still inside her. He gave his name and told them why he killed her. He said because she's an effing whore, that's why. An ambulance crew came and were instructed to wait for the police. They observed Mustafa step outside his home to light a cigarette while he was still covered in blood. Dramatic body-worn camera footage showed the moment that police armed with tasers arrested him. Mustafa was asked, "Where is the female?" and he chillingly replied, "They are both inside." It was the first time officers became aware of a second victim. Nellie Mustafa was found lifeless upstairs in the bedroom, and Zahida was discovered in the garage next to a blood-soaked knife and hammer. Astonishingly, she was still alive, prompting heroic attempts by paramedics to save her, but she was pronounced dead within hours at the hospital. Mustafa had gone in search of her husband, seeking misguided revenge, and her husband was not there, and instead he savagely killed his wife, who he barely knew, let alone believed had any wrongdoing in any way in the situation. The defendant was sat in a hospital room complaining about the tightness of the handcuffs when her death was confirmed to him. By the time he had already made significant ramblings to the police, including the fact that he had taken cocaine and that he had not slept for days, and he was hearing relentless voices in his head. Later that day, while in custody at Perrybar Police Station, he elaborated on one particular delusion to a mental health nurse, describing a boy saying it's you or her. The jury heard evidence from numerous psychiatrists who agreed Mustafa had an abnormality of the mind, and the main task was to determine what impact it had on the decision to carry out the brutal killings. So that will have a major effect on whether they send him to a mental health hospital or if he goes to prison. So my condolences to the families of Nellie Mustafa and also Zahida. And I really appreciate you joining me for this story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And I'll be back again very shortly with some more news. Peace.